Hello, I'm SurferClock.
And I'm TAP-G.
And welcome to What's the Attraction?
Where our work is your vacation.
Is there a ride at Disney or Universal that you miss?
You've got mail.
Wow, 47 emails already. That's gotta be a record outside any PewDiePie video.
Rhetorical question, people. Purely rhetorical.
Disable! 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 It's not working! We're going into meltdown!
Lolcats.
Wow, that worked. They stopped.
Think that's impressive? Watch what happens when I say Nintendo to release Song of the South themed game with Donald Trump cameo.
You've got hate mail.
My God. Some of these are therapy-inducing.
Now watch this. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic.
Aw, I didn't know iPhone made that many different heart emoticons.
Getting back on track, the great attractions of yesteryear. We love so many attractions that have gone away for one reason or another. As much as most of us don't like to admit it, they do often get shut down for legitimate reasons. Popularity fades, attraction numbers drop, or more significant independent property services. Whatever. Although we're pretty sure you already have it planned out in your heads as thus.
Yes. So you're telling me that people like these rides you speak of?
Yes, sir.
That will not do. No, it will not do, will it? Not while there's money to be had. Not while there are properties to upsell and merchandise to market. But most importantly, we have dreams to destroy. Nostalgia to crush.
Sir, you can't mean...
Do it. Replace Wonders of Life at Epcot with convention space!
No!
Leave 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea closed for years before destroying it!
No!
Shoehorn Zazu and Iago into the Tiki Room!
No! For the most part, many of us take ride closures with a grain of salt. It was a precedent Walt himself set forth in 1955, vowing to develop, add, and replace new attractions. But sometimes it may make sense on paper, but we're always sad to see old favorites go. In today's episode, we're looking at the most loved, most fondly remembered attractions. The ones where everybody cried long and hard after they closed, and aren't entirely satisfied with what has taken up residence since.
The ones that sparked blogs, protests, emails, witty memes, snide barbs at various cast and team members at the parks you mutter under your breath in fleeting moments of making your voice heard without inconveniencing or offending anyone.
Let's get started with...
It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 10. Jaws at Universal Studios, Florida. When Universal opened its gates in 1990, it had various areas, shows, and set pieces, as a way to be in touch with its Hollywood roots, where the West Coast park was predominantly a studio backlot. The three main draws it had were Earthquake, the big one, Confrontation, and Jaws. Earthquake gradually made way for Disaster, and subsequently made way for Fast and the Furious. Confrontation emo stepped off the building for Brendan Fraser.
Nice one.
Thank you.
All three rides suffered malfunctions by the truckload in those clumsy first years, with Jaws faring the worst out of all of them. So bad, in fact, Universal Creative had to close the attraction for 3 years while they switched ride manufacturers. Though technical issues still plagued poor Bruce for years, it became a fan favorite quickly.
Great pacing, great storytelling, and genuine scares made this a very popular spot for more than 20 years. But darn those inner mechanics that didn't always work up to snuff.
In 2012, just 2 days into the year, Jaws closed up, much to everyone's shock, anger, horror, and all those other little multicolored people in everyone's heads. Sure, mechanical issues were a problem, but worth shutting down over? Many say nay. Then everyone found out what was replacing it. What? Universal's closing Jaws? No! How could those idiots ruin my childhood? They don't know what the fans want. How could they do this? I'm not renewing my annual pass. Wait, they're making Diagon Alley? Oh my God, that's amazing! Was I angry about something?
Yeah, the reason it's so low on our list is because even though people do miss it, it was replaced by something universally loved. Well, nearly universally.
Diagon Alley proved to be as popular as Islands of Adventure's Hogsmeade, almost to the point where it was forgotten about. Yeah, almost.
I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 9. Back to the Future the Ride at Universal Studios Florida. So, on October 21st, 2015, while everyone was doing their Doc Brown impressions on hoverboards, reading about Marty on their USA Todays, cruising in their DeLoreans, we were...
Not drinking Pepsi Perfect.
And Universal's meet and greet with the eccentric Doc with the DeLorean had its longest line in years. Not just because the franchise was that awesome, but the ride was that popular. When Universal stumbled clumsily in its first few years with Jaws, Earthquake, and Confrontation constantly breaking down, Back to the Future the ride was its one saving grace, zooming in 1991.
Sure, Marty never showed up, but Doc Brown and Tom Wilson as Biff Tannen still hammed up their roles to the nth degree, and we were literally along for the ride. We got to go through so many different eras and encounter more dangers, and we loved it. Unfortunately, it came with one glaring flaw: a literal expiration date. In its first scene, we zip around Hill Valley in 2015. And as we've seen, we don't have Jaws 19, we don't have hoverboards, and we don't have...
Pepsi Perfect.
Pepsi Perfect!
Personally, I'm still waiting for when yellow coats and transparent ties become fashion trends and my girlfriend suddenly turns into Elizabeth Shue.
In 2008, Universal gave its time travelers a grand send-off ceremony, much to everyone's heartbreak. In its place came Matt Groening's brainchild, The Simpsons, which at least was kind enough to dedicate part of its Q pre-show an explanation as to what became of Doc Brown and the Institute of Future Technology.
It's literally the same ride system, just with a totally different IP overlay. And say what you will about The Simpsons in its later years, the ride still features the show's biting satire and wit. Back to the Future, as it stands, is perfect as its own little time capsule, a window into the 1980s, and its view, albeit an intentionally farcical one, as stated by Zemeckis himself, of what 2015 would be like. Now that Back to the Future is now back to the past, we can keep it as a loving homage rather than beat a dead horse with a DeLorean.
Unless Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan demands we make more.
I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 8. Horizons at Epcot.
Never has a ride been so loved, yet left so little in the minds of the popular consciousness.
What started as a pseudo-sequel to the perennially popular Carousel of Progress. After celebrating the technological marvels of the 20th century, General Electric agreed to sponsor a second Disney attraction, this time celebrating the marvels of the 21st century. As if ripped straight out of Walt Disney or Gene Roddenberry's playbook, guests would ogle at the marvels of life in the future, plus colonization of either the desert, the sea, or the moon. It was the first Disney attraction to feature multiple endings.
Then, without warning, in January of 1999, Horizons closed. Why? Disney never gave an official answer, but if several speculative sources are to be believed, a small sinkhole appeared on the south side of the building, causing structural damage. After a year, Disney decided it was better to demolish Horizons and build a newer, smaller ride. More still, Epcot, long considered by many to be the broccoli of theme parks. That's a quarter for the some jerk with a camera jar. Epcot was in dire need of thrill rides. Just Test Track alone wasn't cutting it. Clearly, Epcot needed a giant, space-themed, NASA-grade centrifuge, which still leaves a bad taste in many fans' mouths. But one of its most iconic images, the robot Butler, still hangs out at one man's dream, along with a few singing vegetables and Figment as a reminder of Epcot's glory days.
I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 7. Studio Backlot Tour at Disney MGM Studios / Disney's Hollywood Studios.
Yeah, this one still stings. And unlike most of the other attractions on this list, this closed gradually over its 25-year run. Heck, originally the tour was 2 hours long and divided into 2 parts. There was the tram tour, and then there was the walking tour. But as the park grew in popularity, it was carefully culled a little at a time to allow more space for guests to walk.
Sadly, the knell for this attraction came pretty quickly. The Disney MGM Studios, like Universal Studios up the road, was intended to be a real legit studio. The problem? Well, ever try to film a show where sound control is imperative, and yet those guys who run the theme park insist on running those loud, clunky, diesel-fueled trams every 20 minutes? Not nearly as easy as it sounds.
This didn't end the backlot tour so much as it ended all live filming at Disney MGM Studios. It's hard, if not impossible, to tell if this was the main reason why filming stopped in Central Florida in general, but it sure didn't help. Filming in the sound stages were limited to a day or two a week, and the trams were gawking at empty sound stages before stopping filming altogether. By the time 2014 rolled around, the backlot tour was scarcely a shell of its former self. from 2 hours to 20 minutes. No more filming to watch while promoting Pearl Harbor, a 14-year-old movie, and Residential Street was removed to make way for Lights, Motors, Action Extreme Stunt Show in 2003.
Then in September 2014, Disney announced it would close, giving riders only a week left to ride it once more. It left only the Great Movie Ride and Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular as the original 1989 attractions still open. And supposedly what was left back there, from Walt Disney's plane to the costuming building to, yes, Catastrophe Canyon, to be part of the Toy Story and or Star Wars themed expansions.
But hey, at least you can still ride the original studio tour tram at Universal Studios Hollywood. You know, the original backlot tour that's been running for literally 100 years.
Well, Herbie's not there, so it's automatically no good.
Can't please them all.
I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 6. Disney's River Country.
Yes, one of the most fascinating forbidden fruits of Walt Disney World, akin to Discovery Island.
In 1976, Disney opened its first water park with something of a deep south Tom Sawyer Huckleberry Finn feel. Then on September 1st of 2001, River Country closed, and everyone, including the company, expected to open again once spring rolled around. Then came the summer of 2002,
And the summer of 2003,
and the summer of 2004.
ad nauseum.
It never reopened. It disappeared like Jimmy Hoffa or that conspiracy nut neighbor who said last week he was on to something big before his apartment went vacant overnight.
Many point to the bacteria in the natural water that tragically caused the death of a child in 1980. As a result, Disney had to restrict swimming in the natural lakes. Others point to Florida's Department of Health law, which supposedly restricts that any and all water coming from natural sources, making River Country impossible to keep open since its water comes from Bay Lake.
Judges? Oh, I'm sorry, but thanks for playing. The aforementioned law on water quality only has to ensure the water in parks has to be at least potable. It makes no distinction about where it has to come from. Furthermore, Disney already had a filtration system in place for its water slides where they pulled water from Bay Lake.
So, if a 21-year-old incident and a law about potable water didn't close River Country so unceremoniously, what did?
9/11. After the national tragedy that happened only 10 days later, people were afraid to fly and travel. The tourism industry hit a huge slump, especially in Florida, which has become one of the world's biggest international destinations. Disney made several cuts to counter the issue, but arguably its biggest one was River Country.
A tiny water park eclipsed by Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach that was cumbersome to access and already closed for the winter and could only hold 5,000 people at a time tops?
Exactly. But instead of demolishing it or making it a new park, Disney just fenced most of it off and left it to rot. Now, don't go back there unless you want to wind up like Adam the Woo and get banned from Disney.
He got approved to come back, though.
Try not to undermine the point, please.
I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 5. The magic of Disney animation at Disney MGM, Disney's Hollywood Studios. Like the Backlot Tour, what it opened as and what it closed as are two totally different animals. From 1989 until 2004, as a means to showcase how Disney animated films were made, this attraction was a legitimate studio where animators, storymen, camera operators, and more were seen working on the next animated feature film. And having a pre-show starring Walter Cronkite and Robin Williams made it all the cooler.
But once the almighty executives in Burbank decided that hand-drawn films weren't profitable anymore, and that computer-animated films were the way to make bank, it was time to close up shop at their satellite studios in both France and Florida, mostly so they could keep a better eye on their animators. When the building reopened in 2004, it became a brief video presentation, character meet and greet, and drawing class. This form hung around until July of 2015, when it was literally given its 2-week notice.
In its place came the Star Wars Launch Bay, a means to promote a movie that, let's all agree, had absolutely no chance whatsoever at the box office without extra marketing. Right now, it remains to be seen if it'll become anything remotely close to the grandeur of the original animation studio had, or at least something whose purpose was beyond one of mere synergy.
To be fair, that was the main point of it in the first place.
True, but an animation process on display made it more than just shameless cross-promotion. Tell me the purpose of the launch bay outside of go see the movie.
Buy the video games?
Case currently resting.
I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 4. Nickelodeon Studios at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida.
That was a bit superfluous.
I know, but it has a nice ring to it.
While not an attraction per se, Nickelodeon was an icon, a monument to the inherent awesomeness of being a kid in the 90s. Adjoining next door to Universal Studios, the immense building housed some of Nick's greatest shows, like Double Dare, Figure It Out, Legends of the Hidden Temple, Kenan and Kel, All That, What Would You Do, Allegra's Window, and many more.
Nickelodeon was renowned as the first cable network for kids, full of animated programs, game shows, sketch comedies, and sitcoms. It also ushered in the age of the 90s where gross was cool, because Nick's trademark was slime. Lots and lots of green slime. Parents give you too many chores? Slime them! Teachers giving you a tough assignment? Slime! That one kid take your favorite Goosebumps book, your Ecto Cooler, and your Lion King plastic lunchbox complete with thermos? Slime! Slime! Slime!
In 2005, the contract between Viacom and Universal expired, and Nick's glory decade never quite reclaimed its status. The building was soon closed, its vivid colors painted over. The glorious slime geyser was dismantled, and the time capsule was dug up and moved to the Nickelodeon Hotel near Walt Disney World. But probably most jarring of all, the network of green and orange became replaced by blue and black.
In 2007, the studio became the Sharp Aquos Theater, and the home to the eternally raucous, eternally bizarre, and eternally blue Man Group. Was that worth the trade-off? Well, it's tough to say considering Nickelodeon's popularity streak could only keep itself going for so long. But realizing a monument that represented your childhood in such a vivid, over-the-top way was swapped out for something like the Blue Man Group is disheartening for many.
Personally, I miss seeing people getting slimed.
And speaking of physical challenges,
I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 3. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at the Magic Kingdom. Yeah, you all knew then this one was coming. It's practically blasphemy to talk about heartbreaking closures without bringing up Toad.
In 1949, Disney released The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, a movie featuring the stories of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and The Wind in the Willows. In the latter segment, the auto-obsessed amphibian aristocrat leads the police in a manic chase over London, which inspired the opening day Disneyland and Walt Disney World rides.
Hop aboard the turn-of-the-century jalopies and careen out of control through Toad Hall, the streets of London, the posh countryside. And finally, parked safely and carefully into a garage. A garage that looks almost exactly like a railroad track with an oncoming train.
And in the grand fashion of most great Disney rides, you find yourself deep in the bowels of hell, surrounded by hundreds of imps and demons ready to torment you for the rest of time for all your terrible sins.
In 1997, Disney realized that Winnie the Pooh, a very lucrative franchise, had been around for 30 years at the Mouse House and still didn't have his own ride. Once the first announcements were made that Pooh Bear was ousting Mr. Toad, Disney was surprised, if not downright flabbergasted, that people were upset. It was one of the internet's very first protests on SaveToad.com. There was even in-park protests called Toad-Ins from passionate fans because, well, I guess every trip to Walt Disney World needs a trip to hell.
You know, someone argued that a trip to Disney is...
Wah, wah.
Toad still stands as a rather morbid memorial in the pet cemetery over at the Haunted Mansion, and he's still wreaking Grand Theft Auto havoc over in California. Even though Pooh continues to be one of Fantasyland's most popular rides, many still pine for the days of vehicular toad slaughter in the subterranean pits of eternal torment.
And you wish upon a star.
I hope you had the time of your life.
Number 2. The extraterrestrial alien encounter at the Magic Kingdom.
Oh yes, the only other scary ride at the Magic Kingdom.
Haunted Mansion doesn't count, you wuss.
Says you.
Says everyone.
Semantics.
No, it isn't.
Habeas corpus.
Not what you think it means.
Reese, tell SurferClock I'm not a wuss!
Here's a wuss!
No respect. I don't got no respect at all.
As we've covered in an earlier episode, Alien Encounter was genuinely intended to frighten and scare Magic Kingdom guests, from its opening in 1995 to its final days in 2003. It was such a unique specimen of Disney ride that it was impossible to not have its own cult following.
So after the dark, intense, alien-centric ride was phased out, it was replaced by a dark, intense, alien-centric ride. Only instead of something worthy of Ripley aboard the Nostromo, we got Stitch.
It seems as though Disney had a surprise hit on their hands with 2002's Lilo and Stitch, and given the popularity of the Little Blue Imp and the mixed reviews of Alien Encounter, there seemed to be only one solution: incorporate Stitch as the threatening alien. That way, kids would enjoy the adorable antics of Stitch, while adults could still enjoy the scary parts. At least, that was the idea.
Stitch's Great Escape still garners criticism as one of the worst attractions on Disney property, and yet it's already been around longer than Alien Encounter, with no signs of renovating or closing anytime soon. And the number one most heartbreaking ride closure is
Journey into Imagination at Epcot. Imagine, if you will, an attraction celebrating the most admirable and unique trait of humans, aside from humor, imagination. Imagine it was filled with whimsy and optimism, filled with gentle mirth, and valuing what can be built and created with a mere spark of imagination.
For a time, that was what we had. Journey into Imagination was opened from 1983 to 1999 and starring the whimsical Dreamfinder and his playful friend, the childlike Figment. The duo would whisk guests away through art, literature, theater, and music, and fun and adventure to be had with imagination. Throw in a Sherman Brothers song, and you have a truly magical attraction that produced Epcot's most loved and most iconic mascot.
The details on what happened are fuzzy. From what we can tell, Kodak was the sponsor of the Imagination Pavilion, and its contract was set to expire. At the time, Fujifilm, then Kodak's rival,
This was a time before camera phones, kids.
was looking to take over the sponsorship and make it a brand new ride, one that was totally not about imagination.
Kodak feared this was going to happen, and they wanted to continue the contract with Disney. Their counteroffer? Make it shorter, cheaper, and more scientific. After all, despite its popularity, the ride was showing its age and was expensive to keep up. This enticed Disney enough to agree to sign with Kodak once again.
You can make the argument that in most of the closures we've mentioned on this list, Disney and Universal both had good intentions in trying to improve or add to their guest experience. But in this one, Disney sacrificed quality almost purely for the sake of saving money. And this was all while the ride was still popular.
In 1999, the new quote-unquote improved version of Journey into Your Imagination opened to a glorious, almost pure rejection. Dreamfinder and Figment were evicted in favor of Dr. Nigel Channing,
Who began the ride by scanning our heads and telling us we had no imagination. Seriously? For reals?
Each room would feature different stimuli to get your imagination going, like various sounds, colors, and words, etc., and was more about sparking the imagination, looking at it from a scientific perspective. Because if Epcot needed to pull itself out of the public perception of being dull, boring, and uninteresting, they needed to go from enchanting whimsy and fun to...
Needless to say, few were impressed. It's safer to say many were simply shocked and angry. 2 years later, after a torrent of angry letters and complaints, Journey into Your Imagination was closed down. So, logically, this meant bringing back Dreamfinder and Figment, right? And all the magic and wonder of one's imagination, right? Judges?
Ooh, denied! Yes, Figment returned, but minus a certain ingredient Dreamfinder imbued in him.
I'll throw in a dash of childish delight.
The Figment we fell in love with became an incorrigible imp intent on pranking the exasperated Dr. Channing, who, despite Eric Idle being a capable comedian, is not very funny. The shift from scientific to imaginative and magic-y were ever so slightly that its intent is to be like one big science experiment on all the five senses, but Figment would rather destroy years of hard work and research to punk Dr. Channing and park guests. It's no wonder there is no Department of Imagination research in the government echelons, and even more why there is no government funding.
Hello, Dr. Channing. It's time for your quarterly review. How are things in the Imagination Institute?
Yes, there's, a slight setback, Mr. K. It'll take a bit longer than expected.
How long is a bit?
4 months?
Doctor,
7 years.
the Department of Defense doesn't like bad news, Channing.
I know, sir.
Where's all the money we were sending you?
Well, sir, you know how you wanted to have us make more dragons, like what Dreamfinder did?
Yes.
Well, we did, but...
Good! Now you remember to imbue it with a sense of aggression.
Well, yeah, it's just not enough.
How you mean?
He thought it'd be funny to unplug our machines, lock our top researchers in the custodial closet, flip our laboratory literally upside down, and transport the entire institute to a tropical island.
So he's not so much a destructive monster as much as...
An annoying little prankster.
I see.
Yeah.
That does it. We're pulling your funding.
But if you do that, we'll have to sell to that mercenary mouse.
Mercenary mouse? That's me, huh? Ultimately, what began as a whimsical romp into the human imagination was turned into a soulless, sarcastic version due to a warped contract negotiation, and retweaked to a halfway fixed iteration devoid of whimsy. And that is why it is the most heartbreaking ride closure of all.
Did we miss any of your favorites? Seriously, this guy misses Legend of Jack Sparrow?
Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm SurferClock.
And I miss Discovery Island.
And thanks for listening to What's the Attraction?
Where our work is your vacation.
Sorry, folks, park's closed. The moose out front should have told you.